Fantastic. So I think we are ready to start. First of all, thank you so much to everyone for joining our webinar today. To introduce myself, my name is Nishal Patel. I'm a partner and head of immigration at Child and Child. I'm really excited today to host the seminar with my colleagues from our various legal departments, from our property team, private wealth team, and also our family team. Child and Child were really keen to reach out to clients at this point of time, especially the ways in which we're looking at ways of our new working measures, working from home and new restrictions with authorities and processing. We've got some fantastic speakers speaking today about all things legal, and we've got a presentation arranged with Stephen Oskin, who'll be talking about property issues. Alvaro Aznar will be talking about private wealth. We have Nina Lake speaking about family issues, and we've got myself speaking about all things immigration. We'll also have time at the end for any questions. At the moment, I've put you all on mute, but if you do have any questions at the end, then please feel free to unmute yourself, and we'll be happy to address any questions that you have. Fantastic. So to start off with, I would like to introduce you to Stephen Roskin from our property team. Stephen will be talking about some of the challenges and issues that individuals and lawyers are facing at the moment with buying and selling property.
Okay, thank you, Nishal, and hello, everybody. So, as Nishal mentioned, I specialise and work in residential property in the residential property team at Child and Child, and so I'll talk briefly about the impact that COVID-19 has had in this sector. So the virus and the subsequent lockdown has obviously impacted many parts of life and many different processes for different reasons. It has had a clear and a fairly immediate impact on property matters and conveyancing transactions, which is what I do. Some of these are short-term issues which we as conveyancers are needing to adapt to, and there are also probably some more medium-term issues to consider. The government has advised to delay moving house where at all possible, but there is no law prohibiting it or saying that a particular process or steps need to be taken, just some guidance which is obviously important to consider. So I'll briefly run through a couple of the issues. Firstly, there are the health concerns and the lockdown itself. Obviously, of primary importance underlying the current situation is the need for people to be isolated, not catch the virus, and stay well. What that means is a lot of people are not going to work in a normal manner, and for property transactions more specifically, it means people aren't able to view properties that they might want to buy, or to visit estate agents, or even to visit their solicitor to provide things such as passport or the KYC documents, which are usually very important for us to get. The biggest issue, though, as I touch on, is that buyers and sellers cannot be connected easily, and viewings and second viewings cannot take place. Hence, putting new deals together right now is very difficult. This may continue to be the case even after the current lockdown is lifted, as there is likely to be some form of social distancing encouraged for a while, and people may be reluctant to go to another person's property for a viewing. Another issue linked to the health concerns is that even for transactions that are ongoing and perhaps able to reach the point of exchange of contracts, is that there may be reluctance or concern to move to someone's flat or house for fear that they may have or have had the virus. It may be that the property needs to be decontaminated before a buyer would move in if there was a confirmation or concern about health risk, and so that's something that might need to be considered in the process. There are then logistical issues which we are facing. So the mentioned health concerns and lockdown are also leading to wider logistical issues that can potentially make the property and sale transaction process more difficult. The fact that most people are working from home is making some process and communication slower. One example of that is the postal service taking longer than usual, meaning that important documents can't be circulated and received as promptly as usual. One of the main concerns that we have discussed and come across at Child and Child and heard about is the logistical issues with mortgages. Generally, the banks seem to be operating normally at the moment, and money is moving around where needed. And so for cash buyers in the UK, there don't appear to be any major issues currently. For foreign buyers, it may be more difficult depending on where they are and any restrictions in place there. For mortgages, there are some more logistical hurdles in the process. The main one being that physical valuations for properties cannot take place at the moment, meaning that mortgage applications can only go so far, and buyers can't, with any speed, get their mortgage offers. Desktop valuations may be possible in some cases, but at the moment that's certainly not something that's widespread. In addition, there are the usual additional checks and balances and parts of the conveyancing process that need to be done where there is a mortgage lender. For example, signature of mortgage deeds. There is the inability to take a view where you've got a mortgage that a cash buyer might be able to do if something hasn't quite been confirmed or provided. And there is also the need to provide the bank with sufficient notice of when the funds are required. Accordingly, any transaction requiring a mortgage, whatever the stage it's at, is at risk of having delays somewhere in the process. A further logistical issue, which I've already touched on, is moving itself, difficult when there's a nationwide lockdown in place. In addition to possible personal concerns about moving to another person's property in the current environment, there may also be difficulty in finding a removal company willing to pick up items from one property and take them to another. The final main issue which I touch on is uncertainty. So the current situation has brought to the country and the economy uncertainty, which is never good for the property market. In the past, we've had banking crises, political uncertainty, in particular, obviously Brexit recently has slowed the market, but this is something completely new and unprecedented, as everybody likes to say, and no one really knows how it will play out. Hence, people are naturally cautious to invest substantial sums of money in property unless it's really necessary, and lots of people take the view that they may be best to wait until things become a little more certain. Savills estate agents who regularly carry out and provide research on the property market conditions have suggested that the next 3 months we will see substantial drops in transaction levels, but they don't expect there to be a significant impact on property values in the medium to long term. So what can we do? Ultimately, as property lawyers, our job and priority is to serve our clients and look out for their interests. We can't do much about the uncertainty, and we will need to be patient with some of the processes and delays to transactions that are inevitably going to happen. There are measures we can and should take in order to protect clients where necessary. Allowing time for the various processes is important. One example with residential transactions is ordering the usual property searches that we always do as soon as possible, as these are taking longer than usual. When getting to the key stages of the transaction, namely exchange and completion, we need to ensure that contracts have some flexibility built in, particularly with regards to time for completion. Delays beyond one of the parties' control in getting documents signed and returned, or getting money transferred, or even arranging removals could disrupt completion, and you don't want your client to be liable for any delay under a contract where a delay in the current circumstances is reasonably foreseeable. We are therefore adopting what we're calling COVID-19 clauses into our contracts, which allow for delays and flexibility in these cases. These are particularly important where there is a mortgage, in case of any delays with the mortgage and getting the funds, and but they should also be advised for cash purchasers, and should be advised to sellers also, who could equally find themselves in breach of contract if they can't carry out a task for completion, such as being able to remove all of their items in time. Most lawyers that I've dealt with in the last few weeks are so far willing to agree such clauses, and they are ultimately recommended by the Law Society. But inevitably, some parties and some lawyers may not be keen to agree clauses in contracts that allow for delay. If that is the case, it's important to advise any client on the risk of proceeding to exchange of contracts. So to conclude, Transactions are still happening. Some people want to get on with buying and selling regardless of the current difficulties. And there are probably some people out there that will see the current situation as an opportunity. In the medium term, Savills researchers believe that the suppressed activity now means they expect to see a build-up of latent demand. Things were very buoyant just before this crisis hit. We were very busy. And so, as property lawyers, we hope that that buoyancy will return in the future, but it's just difficult at the moment to predict when that will be. For now, deals can still be agreed and the full conveyancing process can still be worked through, and hence the wheels of the system and of the removal vans can keep moving. But for now, there's just going to be a bit more difficulty and delay.
Fantastic, thank you, Stephen. So just to summarise, so if anyone is in the moment of purchasing a property or selling a property, how important is it to ensure that they are liaising with their property lawyer at this time?
Yeah, it's very important, and usually in the process we are regularly in touch anyway, and we try to keep people updated. But because there is an added need for patience and for understanding timings and risks of delay, I think it's particularly important to kind of be kept updated and seek reassurance and any further information whenever they feel necessary.
The expectations can be managed on all sides, so everyone's clear about what's happening.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stephen. That's really helpful. Now I'd like to introduce you to Alvaro Aznar from our private wealth team. Alvaro will be talking things about wills and power of attorneys, something really important from this climate. Alvaro, you just need to take yourself off mute. Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, Nishil. Thank you everyone for joining. Well, my area of expertise or work, as a former colleague used to say, is mainly dealing with death, doom and destruction. So I'll try to make it as interesting for you as possible. The coronavirus, if anything, has brought a surge on the number of wills and lasting power of attorney inquiries. People now, they have the time to prepare and think for those unfortunate events in the future. So basically, I want to focus my talk more on wills and lasting powers of attorney, which is one of the areas that have more demand at the moment. In terms of wills, basically, my word of advice would be that you are never too young or too old to have a will. Basically, a will lets you choose who is going to inherit your assets when you're no longer here, to make any decision, and also to plan in a tax-efficient manner. So I don't know if many people ask themselves what would happen if they die without a will. So basically, if they are assuming that they are English domiciled, that they are married with children, what would happen is that their spouse will get £270,000 from the state, and the remaining assets in the state will be split into two. So one share will pass to the spouse, who will have the absolute interest on this half share of the state, and the other share will pass to the children, who will have it equally. So I will also let you choose your executors and the guardians if you have minor children. Your executors will play a key role in your estate. Basically, what they will do is they will convert your estate into cash and pay your liabilities, pay your legacies, and distribute the residue amongst your named beneficiaries. In addition, having a will help you protect your loved ones, because what happens if you are living with an unmarried partner and you don't have a will? Basically, what will happen is that your partner will not have an automatic right on the state. So basically, your partner will have to bring a claim on the state, which will imply a considerable amount of costs and uncertainty, because you don't know how much your partner can get out of the state. So it will be left to the court's discretion. I also mentioned that a will lets you plan in a tax efficient manner. And why is this? Well, basically what happens is if you are a UK domicile or non-UK domicile with assets in the UK, you have a nil rate band allowance. So basically this nil rate band is £325,000, which are free of any tax. And whatever amount exceeds this £325,000 will be taxed at a rate of 40%. So if you are, for example, UK domiciled, all your worldwide assets will have to be declared for UK inheritance tax. And for example, if you have assets in another jurisdiction, you will be able to benefit from either a unilateral tax relief or a double tax treaty if there is one in place with that country. Also, if you are married or in a civil partnership and both of you are either UK domicile or non-UK domicile, although there are exceptions if one is, if you are a UK domicile inheriting from a non-UK domicile, basically you can benefit from what is called the spousal exemption. So basically what it means is that whatever assets pass to your spouse on death, they will be free of inheritance tax. Assuming that you leave all your assets to your spouse and you don't leave any assets to any other party, like your children, you can, on your death, basically, your £325,000 allowance will be unused and could be transferred to your spouse's estate. So basically, on the second death, the parties can benefit, or the beneficiaries actually will benefit from a combined nil rate ban allowance of £650,000 as it stands at the moment. And on top of that, if in the States there is a main residence that is passed to the children or descendants, they can benefit up to a maximum of £175,000 for the main residence allowance. So last but not least, we have the lasting powers of attorney. The lasting powers of attorney, they came to replace what they were called at the time the enduring powers of attorney. The lasting powers of attorney are similar to a general power of attorney, but with the main difference that the lasting power of attorney will still be valid even if you have no capacity. So I think, and I like to call them a life insurance policy, basically, because your attorneys will be able to operate with your finances or making health and care decisions on your behalf when you no longer have capacity to do so. So basically, there are two main LPAs, which are there for finances and health and care. So in finances, basically what your attorneys can do is to buy and sell property on your behalf, opening, closing, dealing with your bank accounts, paying your bills, claim your benefits, pension. And with healthcare is basically they can make decisions as where you live, your day-to-day care, consent to refuse medical treatment. Basically, what it allows is your attorneys to make the correct decisions because you have left them a series of instructions or guidance as to what will happen when you cannot longer make these decisions yourself. So it is very important that you choose your attorneys carefully because basically they are operating with your wealth and your health. So, for example, the LPAs, once you sign them, you can choose when they start operating. They can start operating from the moment you register them with the Office of the Public Guardian, or when you lose capacity. The problem with registering the lasting power of attorney when you no longer have capacity is that your attorneys will have to prove that you have no capacity. So that can be challenging and tricky. However, if you register your lasting power of attorney straight away, basically your attorneys will need your consent as long as you have capacity. So as a conclusion, both documents, they require the intervention of witnesses. So during this coronavirus situation, this can be tricky, but I think that we have to use a little bit of our creativity, always complying with the law. So basically, this having a witness, you don't have to be physically in the same room. You can be in an outdoor space as long as the witness can see that you're signing the document. For example, each of you can use different pens, you can use gloves, you can use all protective measures you want. You can ask a neighbor to look over the fence and see that you are signing the document, pass them the document or to the letterbox. And I mean, other than that, I mean, this is the only creativity so far that you will have, because there is no guidance that either lasting powers of attorney or wills can be electronically signed. So one hopes that in the future this could be achieved. So in circumstances like this, it will ease up the work for practitioners and clients.
Thank you, Alvaro. So if I had a relative who was in a care home at the moment, or a relative who had medical issues, especially with the time that we have at the moment, so would you say it would be good for me in that case to look at getting a power of attorney?
Of course, as long as they have capacity and they can understand the nature of the document they're entering into, I think that is a fantastic idea, because the moment they don't have capacity, they will allow their attorneys to make decisions like if they were making them themselves, basically. So they will have guidance and support, basically.
And those decisions would be medical decisions as well, so based on what medication to take and what sort of steps to take as well.
Yes, and also one of the things is that if there is no lasting power of attorney in place and the person loses capacity, the person looking after the individual will have to ask for a deputyship order, which can be a costly and, again, lengthy process compared to the cost of having a lasting power of attorney in place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I would like to introduce Nina Lake, a partner from our family team. The family team are encountering a number of issues at the moment, especially with individuals with child separation, domestic abuse. So it's a really good time to hear some really key legal updates from Nina.
Hi, thank you ever so much, Nishal. As Nishal said, my name's Nina Lake. I am a partner in the family team at Child and Child. I'm going to run through a few different issues that we've been experiencing as family law practitioners over the past few weeks since coronavirus hit. I'm going to have a talk about how things have impacted the court process, so people going through court either in relation to divorce or finances, and also children. I'm going to talk a little bit about the difficulties that we're facing in negotiating financial settlements at the moment, the impact of COVID-19 on child arrangements, and I'm also going to touch at the end on domestic violence issues. So starting with the court process, on the 23rd of March, Boris Johnson told the nation to stay at home. So what does that really mean in practice for people that are going through the courts? Well, after some initial guidance, we've actually had some further updates in the last week or so, where the courts have categorized cases into three categories. Firstly, work that must be done. Secondly, work that will be done. And thirdly, work that they will try their best to do. Work that must be done includes things like child abduction and domestic abuse. Work that will be done includes some private law children work that's fairly urgent and other sorts of family care orders. And work that they'll try their best to do is dealing with divorce and financial arrangements on divorce and other less urgent private children work. Now, when they say that they're going to do this work, what do they mean? We've basically seen the court system move on to remote hearings. So that's either by way of telephone link or video conference. They're using things like Skype for Business, Microsoft Teams and Zoom, which I think a lot of people have all of a sudden become very familiar with these platforms. And actually, I think that those those mechanisms have been quite welcomed by a lot of family law practitioners, particularly for some of the more straightforward hearings. I think that a lot of family lawyers feel that actually the courts should be using these platforms anyway, or clients that have an international element to their case, as opposed to everybody having to traipse down to court, having a quick telephone hearing or online hearing kind of makes sense. That said, there's obviously quite a lot of getting to grips with being able to generate court bundles online. The court systems are still very paper heavy, so getting to grips with sort of how to amend PDF bundles and things like that. And also just being able to use these platforms. I know there's been a lot of training going around from various organisations, which has been helpful. But I've definitely spoken to quite a few lawyers that have been pretty stressed out, having hearings coming up and not quite knowing how things are going to work. That said, you know, it's really positive that we've moved on to these online platforms, but quite a lot of court hearings have been adjourned. And I think those are generally the work that they'll try their best to do. So we have seen quite a few adjournments, and I think the reaction to that has been a lot of clients taking up alternate dispute resolution options. So either going to mediation, trying out arbitration, or having private hearings where you basically pay for a judge to sit, and having these meetings or hearings on online platforms as well, so that clients can get on with their case, as opposed to just have a case adjourned for several months and see what the lay of the land is then. I think that again is quite a positive move for the industry, looking at these alternative dispute resolutions. I mean, the courts generally are very overrun with cases, and I think it's a positive thing for clients to be able to have a little bit more control over how their case is heard, the time frames, what needs to be done. There's just a lot more flexibility in alternate dispute resolution hearings. Of course, there's clients that are quite happy for their case to be adjourned and to wait until things kind of settle down. So that's what we're seeing with the court process. Now, what about actually negotiating settlements, particularly in relation to finances? I think the key for family lawyers is, the first thing we always want to know is, well, what's in the matrimonial pot? What are the parties' finances? Because without that information, we can't easily advise as to what a sensible financial settlement should be. And I've had quite a few clients that have come to me, and their investment portfolio or their properties are actually kind of up in the air. You know, some investments have gone up, some have gone down, property values have a question mark over them. And I think for that reason, some clients are finding it difficult to negotiate, and lawyers are finding it difficult to advise as to what a sensible financial settlement should be. That aside, I think a lot of clients going through divorces at any time are really keen to see the end of the process. And so to say, oh, well, we'll wait for 6 months for things to settle down isn't really an acceptable option. So in some respects, we're having to sort of do the best we can. And I think that the instruction of experts can be a really valuable tool at this time. So getting an opinion from an estate agent, for example, as to the valuation of a property, or a property expert to give a steer on how the industry might be affected for a property value. Or getting an accountant to look at a business and things like that. I think those can be quite valuable tools at this time to move a case forward. So thirdly, child arrangements. And I know this was very topical a few weeks ago in the press. There were big question marks over, well, if everybody's got to stay at home, what about children that move between separated families? And fairly quickly, the government gave some clarification on that and said that children under the age of 18 can move between separated parents. And I think that was really welcomed. I know that there's jurisdictions that didn't have such clarification. So, for example, in Italy, parents were having to go to court to argue over the time their children were spending with both parents during the lockdown period in Italy. It's not, however, possible for all families. So if we think about international families where children are flying back and forth between parents, well, with current travel restrictions, it's just not possible. Same goes for things like grandparents or aunties, uncles, people that spend time with the children. There hasn't been any clarification on that either. And I think on those cases, I mean, on all children cases, really, I suppose there's got to be a degree of really thinking about what's in your children's best interest and doing the best you can on a case-by-case basis. So I think a lot of my clients who have children, they're turning to things like FaceTime and Zoom and online interactive games so that children that can't see parents or other family members can still interact with them. And prevent sort of arguments and disagreements about the children spending time with them. And of course, every parent has to make the decision as to whether it's safe for a child to go back and forth between two households, and if, for example, somebody is unwell in the other household. And so there does need to be, I think, an element of flexibility between parents during this time, which is sometimes easier said than done, but really those that do offer a bit of flexibility and understanding will probably have a slightly easier time. Lastly, I'm just going to have a quick chat about domestic violence, because I think this has really ramped up over the last week or so in terms of, again, being a topical issue in the press. People that are victims of domestic violence, this period can obviously be absolutely detrimental to them. You know, they could be trapped in a home with their abuser, and things could become very difficult. Reports of domestic violence tend to surge during the summer and the Christmas holiday periods, where families are spending more time together, which is quite a sad statistic. And I do suspect that that's probably going to be the situation during this time as well. In fact, China has already started to report an increase in reports of domestic violence. There's been a social media hashtag trending, which is hashtag anti-domestic violence during epidemic, which I think is a great tool to bring some awareness to the issues that we're currently facing and that people experiencing domestic violence are facing. This does, of course, only go so far, and thankfully, in the last week, we have finally had some clarification from the government for victims of domestic violence. They've basically been told they can leave the house to get away from an abuser. And also a reminder that the police are still available to assist. You know, their responsibilities to look after vulnerable people are still there. So if domestic violence reports are called in, then they are expected to act. And just sort of going back to what I was saying at the beginning about the court system and work that must be done by the court, that the court have said is a priority, domestic violence cases are part of that. So it is still possible to get injunctions to prevent and restrict abusers from being abusive. So I think really the key is there that if you are worried for anybody in that sort of situation, then number one, the police are still at your disposal, and number two, it's really important to get legal advice to see what injunctions might be available through the courts to assist. So those are really the main topics, I think, impacting family lawyers at the moment. So I think I'll pass back to Nishal.
Thank you, Nina. And you know, I think it's so important, especially when we're hearing so much in the news about sort of harrowing domestic abuse and the amount of numbers that are increasing at the moment, that, you know, people can actually call the police or get out of their homes. So that was really useful to hear that. And also, you know, about family courts adjusting to the ways of our new working. I think that is in a much more advanced stage than we are in our immigration field, for example, where our first tier tribunal, we've had the cases, they have been adjourned, but nothing has really sort of started yet in terms of webinars or case hearings by Zoom or anything like that. So it's really encouraging to hear that the family courts are taking steps, you know, to make sure that courts are, you know, are open and for individuals, especially vulnerable individuals, to be heard at this important.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think they were quite hot off the mark. There are still teething problems. Not every case is being heard. Obviously, some things can be, but yeah, they're really trying to get up to speed. They're making their best efforts, I think. So hopefully, we have a streamlined process soon enough.
Fantastic, thank you, Nina. So I will be talking through all things immigration. So I would like to concentrate on two main areas. The first area is for individuals who are currently in the UK, who've got a visa and do not know what to do because there is a lockdown in their country, or they are unable to travel because of the travel bans. And then secondly, for individuals who are in the process of applying for a visa application, or individuals who had actually had a visa application approved, but they can't travel at the moment because of the lockdown. But what I'll be doing is going through the key main questions that I've been asked on a daily basis so that I can address these issues for you. The first main question that I've been asked is, what can individuals do at the moment whose visas are about to expire or who have already expired? Now, these could be individuals who are visitors in the UK or on temporary visas who were due to travel back to their home country, but are unable to do so because of their lockdown in their particular country. Now, in this instance, the Home Office have actually announced a new policy. So if you are an individual and your visa had expired from the 24th of January up until the 31st of May, you can actually extend your visa whilst you're in the UK. Now, before, the government had said that you can contact the Immigration Coronavirus Help Team in order to extend your visa status. But just yesterday, they've announced a new application form that individuals can complete and then send to the immigration authorities in order for their extensions to be granted. Now, the focus on the applications is to make a much more streamlined process, and so that the coronavirus immigration team is not inundated with a number of emails, and that all applications can be treated as quickly as possible. So if you are one of these individuals, or if you know an individual who is in this circumstance, then they can absolutely apply for a visa at this point just to extend their stay up until the 31st of May. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with the lockdown this week, if it's going to be extended even further. But if there are any other changes to this, then it could be likely that this 31st of May extension could be extended even further. But as soon as we do get any news from this, we will let you know. The second question I've been asked is for individuals who are actually in the UK at the moment and who are seeking to leave the UK in order to re-enter the UK to apply for another visa. Now, this could have been, for example, someone who on a youth mobility scheme visa who had been offered sponsorship by their employer. Now, typically for these individuals, in order to apply for a sponsorship visa, they would need to return back to their home country to re-enter the UK on their new sponsored worker visa. However, the government have allowed individuals in these circumstances, they can actually extend their visa whilst they're in the UK. So it's no longer required to leave the UK. You can actually complete an application form in the UK, and on the basis that you meet all the requirements for the visa application, the application can be posted in the UK to the UK authorities. A UK fee will be charged at the normal UK in-country application rate. So the only change would be that the process of the application can be done in the UK and not outside the UK. One of the biggest areas that we were receiving queries on were furloughing employees, especially furloughing employees who have UK visas. Now, the government hadn't actually announced much information at the beginning of when they announced the furlough changes, but just last week they have actually stated that anyone who is on a visa can be furloughed by their employer. Now, this doesn't actually have to meet, the individual doesn't actually have to meet a salary requirement to be furloughed. So where you've got a tier 2 visa and an individual needs to meet a salary requirement, even though the individual is furloughed, they don't actually have to meet that salary requirement. So they can continue their employment and it wouldn't affect their immigration status whilst in the UK. The main consideration is that the business has to adhere to the terms of the furlough arrangement as we see, And also it must be a temporary measure, so it can't be a permanent measure. And then the final thing is that the furlough scheme can't be introduced just to individuals on visas only. It must be introduced to the whole of the organisation. So it is a majority business decision that the business has taken as a part. I have been receiving a number of queries from European nationals as well, because they're concerned about what's happening. And if you're hearing from the news reports, the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister are still going ahead with their plans on Brexit, and they're still looking at implementing a new UK immigration policy next year, which will impact all European nationals. So if you are a European national or a family of a European national, then you can actually continue to apply for the pre-settled or settled status. So just to remind you, pre-settled status is for any European national or their family member who has been living in the UK for less than 5 years. And the settled status is for anyone in the UK who's been living in the UK for 5 years, and then they can apply to settle in the UK. This is sort of known as indefinite leave to remain, so there's no time limit on their stay. Now, the application route to actually apply for pre-settled and settled status is currently open. So you can use the mobile phone app, and Android users can download the application, and it is also available on iPhone. So if you haven't done so already, it could be a good time to do so, because individuals who are currently in the UK do have up until the end of this year to apply. And if they were outside the UK from 2021, then they may have to come back into the UK under the new UK immigration rules. And this could restrict their activity in the UK. That's why it's really important to look into your options at this point, especially if you have a bit of time. The European settled and pre-settled status could be something to look at. I also spoke to the director of the European Settlement and Caseworking team last week, and she said that they are actually continuing to accept applications from European nationals. It's just that they're operating on a skeleton staff at the moment. So it may be slightly delayed, your visa application to come through, but they are still accepting applications, so you can still continue to apply. The final part of sort of applying from inside the UK I want to discuss is for individuals who are in the process of extending their visas in the UK. Now, if, for example, you are on a work visa, or you're a spouse and you are looking to extend your visa, you can still continue to apply to extend your visas whilst you're in the UK. The applications can be posted online. So the application form is completed online, and as long as it's submitted online, then the individual will continue to have the legal right to reside and work in the UK. Now, as part of the application process, an individual would typically need to take their biometric data. They would have to attend a visa centre to enrol their biometric, which is taking their fingerprints and pictures. However, because this process is not involved, it does not impact the actual consideration of a visa application. So as long as a visa application is submitted online, an applicant can continue to live and work in the UK. Once the lockdown has ended, the applicant can then go onto the application online and then book their appointment to take their biometric data at the visa centre. Once the biometric data has been completed, then the Home Office can complete their work on the visa application and issue the visa accordingly. So if you are in the process of applying for a visa in the UK, or you are looking to extend, you can still continue to do this. So this is something definitely to bear in mind. I'd now like to switch my focus on individuals who are looking to apply from outside the UK. So they could be individuals who are in the process of applying for a visa application in the UK, but feel that they can't do anything at the moment because there are lockdowns in their countries or the visa centres have closed. Now, in these cases, individuals can actually continue to work on visa applications. With visas, there are a lot of administrative functions that can be completed before an application can be finalised. So, for example, if you are on a Tier 1 investor visa, you can still continue to get your bank statements, which you may need for your visa application. Or if you're applying for a sole representative visa, you can still continue to work on your business plan. Or even if you are a sort of sponsored worker, you can still continue to do the advertising for the role, because it is still possible to advertise online to UK and settled workers, and you can still continue that process. It is only once the application is finalised, it's at that point that the process will stop until the lockdown measures have been lifted again. But as long as we're at the finalised stages, we can actually then process the application as soon as possible once the lockdown measures has been completed. So it is definitely something to consider. If you are thinking of applying for a UK visa, you can start looking at working on the application forms, working on the documents, so that when the lockdown measures do get lifted, you can submit your application as soon as possible. Final sort of question that I've been receiving is with regards to visa vignettes. Now, this is an area where I'm still waiting for information from the government from, and we are lobbying with the government on this to get a definite answer on this. Now, if, for example, you had applied for a visa to the UK and it had been granted, then you could have had a 30-day visa vignette in your passport in order to enter the UK. Now, this visa vignette may have already expired because you were not able to travel within the 30-day period due to the travel bans or the lockdowns. Now, previously, an individual would have to apply for a new visa vignette in order to enter the UK. Now, to apply for a new visa vignette can be a timely and costly process because you do have to pay a cost for a visa vignette again, and the timing, it could take up to 15 working days to get another visa vignette in your passport. Now, we're lobbying against the government to say that this is unfair for individuals, especially where they have to pay an additional fee where it's not their fault that they've not been able to travel to the UK. Now, I have heard from my immigration practitioner associations just yesterday, and we are expecting to receive some news on this by this week. So as soon as we do hear anything, we will absolutely let you know so that you can pay your employees, or if you need to, you can, as an individual, being able to apply for a new visa vignette to travel to the UK whenever you need to. Fantastic. So just in summary, from an immigration perspective, even though the visa centres are closed at the moment, there are definitely still ways of working on visa applications at the moment. If you're inside the UK, you can still continue to apply through a postal application or apply to extend your visa. And if you're outside the UK, then you can still continue to work on part of your visa application whilst the lockdown measures are slowly lifted away. So we've heard from all of our colleagues from Child and Child. We've heard from Alvaro from our private wealth team. You've heard from Stephen from our property team, Nina from our family team, and myself from immigration. Now what I'd like to do is open the floor to any questions that anyone would like to ask. If I could ask anyone who would like to ask a question just to unmute themselves, and we'll be happy to address any questions that you have. Fantastic. Just checking again that if anyone has any questions, just to unmute them.
Hi, Nishil. It's Anna from Sahadid Architects. How are you doing?
Hi, Anna. I'm well, thank you.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting. My question is in regards to that second case that you spoke about, where we have somebody that we want to apply for a new visa. We currently got somebody that's working with our Beijing office, and she has been caught in the lockdown. So she came over on a visitor's visa and is now stuck and can't be, or she obviously has the difficulty of going back. We have planned for her to later in the year to come over for a secondment, and we're planning to apply for a Tier 2 visa. But obviously now she's here, she's on a visitor's visa, so can't be doing any work, and we can't get her back to Beijing to start in the process. Any suggestions from your side what a solution on that could be, apart from just waiting and have her sitting in a hotel room not doing a lot whilst we're waiting everything out?
You could look to actually switch her to a Tier 2 visa at this stage, because the Home Office are actually allowing in-country applications, even if you're switching from a visitor visa. So as long as you follow the process for the Tier 2 application, it could be possible for them to apply for a Tier 2 visa whilst they're in the UK. And then once their visa is approved, then they can continue to work, and then they can reside in the UK as well as part of that.
Oh, okay, that's really interesting. I did not know that. Thank you. Look further into that.
Hi, it's Sejal from Menzies. Thank you everyone for that. It was really helpful. Apologies if you've already covered this, but I had a client call in the middle of the webinar. But I think this is for Steve-O. Given the new CGT rules with property disposals effective from 6 April, I know there's not going to be a huge amount of property sales going through, but with CGT and the 30-day limit, is this something you guys are doing from your end with registering for the CGT, or are you still liaising with accountants to be able to do that part of the work?
Thanks for that. The honest answer to that is that the property lawyers tend not to kind of deal with the CGT stuff, and actually pass that over to the tax team. So obviously we are trying to allow flexibility on our side where we can, but that's something a little bit outside our scope. So I'm just going to maybe pass to Alvaro to see if he can add anything more useful for that point.
Hello, one of my colleagues, Denise Bao, that sits in the private wealth team, she can deal with your inquiry regarding CGT. So if you can send her an email, she will be able to discuss your CGT query with you, or alternatively, if you can call her on the office, she will be more than happy to assist you.
Thank you. No, it's just because we're accountants and we actually had this question come up in our group this morning as to whether is it something lawyers doing, given that they're doing the conveyancing, are they going to be dealing with, or are we? I mean, given working remotely, communication isn't the way it would be.
I know, it depends basically on the arrangements between the clients and the advisors that they are involved. It very much depends, but I think that I think it's on a case-by-case basis, basically. Some firms can offer that they have someone in-house that can deal with the CGT returns, other firms don't. In private wealth, in our teams, we have someone that can offer that assistance to clients.
Okay, thank you.
Fantastic. Do we have any other questions at all? No? Okay, fantastic. Well, if you do have any questions or you've got anything privately you want to discuss with us, then please feel free to email any one of us and we'll be happy to address by email or give you a call to just discuss it further. Just to say a big thank you to you all for attending today. It's been really fantastic to hear your thoughts on the webinar, and we have recorded this webinar and we will be posting it on LinkedIn and sharing it with you all. So if you do want to revisit it, then just feel free to absolutely. Then you can then play it again, or you can share it with any of your colleagues. Fantastic. Well, I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and we should look forward to hearing from you soon. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.